It's all subjective. All right, I want to bring our friend Rachel Kugel into this conversation. Rachel, there are so many things I can ask you about that scene. Whether a victim of crime can really remember as clearly as juries think they do what happened. The emphasis we place on victims in our culture, and in this case, there's also in that particular storyline someone who suffers from a mental illness, a big issue in the criminal justice system. But I'm not going to ask you any of that, Rachel. I'm going to ask you this. What do you think of these drama shows? What do you think the impact is on viewers? You know, they talk about the CSI effect and the higher expectations jurors have based on that show. What about legal dramas? Do they expect us all to be scripted and, you know, to the point, and your closing argument's 3 minutes? Do you think they do more harm than good, or do you think one like Raising the Bar might help rebalance the scales a little bit for defense attorneys?
I mean, I think there certainly is a CSI effect. We've seen it here in our trials that we watch on this show, for sure. So there definitely is that. I think sometimes juries do expect us, you know, to be more exciting and more dramatic than we often are in terms of our speech and our oration, although luckily the defense attorneys do get to be more dramatic, so that's usually reserved for us. I'm super excited about this show, though, because I think it's wonderful to finally focus on the defense attorneys. There is so much made of the victims, and certainly they have a place. But I think, you know, and this might be controversial to say, but in the justice system, it's not really entirely about the victims at that point. It is about the defendant at that point. That is the reason that the justice system is there.
It's controversial, but it's also in the Constitution. There's nothing about the victims in there, although some, I won't name any names, would like to change that.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, so there you see the aunt to this defendant, Sister Mary. Let's bring Rachel Kugel into the conversation. You know, this is a death penalty case, so I don't want to be too light about it, but you can't ask for a better witness than a sister.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Can you?
It's the literal Hail Mary pass, you know, quite literally. I mean, bringing in the nun, and she's a wonderful witness, both because she is a nun, and hopefully that invokes a certain amount of trust and mercy, sort of if she can forgive him, if she can understand what happened or try to make sense, then so should the jury. And I think she's doing a wonderful job of humanizing him, despite, you know, the jokes that are available. I think she's doing a great job.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, we were talking here, can she wear a habit into court? I don't know if the judge would allow it, but not all nuns wear habits. I went to Catholic school. Some did, some didn't. It depends on the religious order. Let me ask you this, Rachel. What exactly is the defense trying to do? What do they need to do? We always hear about aggravating circumstances from the prosecution, mitigating from the defense. So what exactly are they trying to show this jury to save Terrence Huff's life?
Well, I think as we've been talking about, what they're trying to show the jury is that they should judge this man not just on the 20 or 30 seconds in which this horrible tragedy ensued and these terrible acts that this man did, but on his whole life and the wonderful things he did, the family he created of his own, the service he provided as a fireman, the type of person he is. I think possibly just as important, they're trying to humanize him. You know, the jury's going to have to make a decision on life or death. They want that to haunt this jury. They want to be thinking about this person, this defendant, as a person and not a monster. That's the most important thing they can get this jury to do, I think.
So do they need Terrence Huff to speak to this jury?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I mean, on the one hand, you know, the guilt phase is over. He can't do himself harm in that regard. I don't think they need him, though. I think usually we can show that through, as they're doing here, through family, friends, etc. I don't think they need him. You know.
Let's see what they decide. I have a little sneak peek as to what happens, and you're going to be surprised. But we also are so pleased to say that we're going to have Jake Hildebrand. He's one of the two to fight or testify on behalf of Terrence Huff. Rachel Kugel, this guy couldn't have a better list of witnesses. He's got the sister, I mean the sister, as in a nun, testifying for him. Now he's got this firefighter who's, you know, central casting for a man who saves lives. And yet it's always an uphill battle, isn't it, when you're facing down a death penalty?
Well, of course. I mean, he's got the ultimate punishment there lurking. And, you know, it just goes to show you what's so sort of shocking about this is, you know, that here's a guy who his chosen profession was putting himself in danger to save others. It just doesn't jive with what happened here. It's really shocking.
You heard the conversation earlier with Jake Hildebrand, father-son, by the way, team. Isn't that something?
It's
working
wild.
with dad in the courtroom? I don't know. My dad's an artist, so there was never, since I have no talent, any possibility I was going to join join his business practice. But there they are, father and son. And you heard him talk about Terrence Huff perhaps standing before that jury, which was a little counter to what you thought he should do. You didn't really think it was necessary, especially with these kinds of witnesses. What's your reaction to that?
You know, I think on some level, it's sort of why not? You know, that's what we were saying before. I mean, what does he have to lose, I suppose? And I guess, you know, being his attorneys and being as close to him as they were throughout this whole thing, they know better than anybody else, you know, how he comes off. And we've talked about this before. It's so important. You don't know how a person's going to come off. You can take all this good stuff and you know, your guy comes off as a monster all of a sudden. Especially, you know, I'm listening to him talk about the specific law in Ohio that allows him to read this statement. That's scary too, you know. I mean, not reading a contrived statement, the person can come off poorly and not being allowed to direct him.
It's kind of an all or nothing moment in that courtroom if he does speak out, which I think he will. And so as we begin to wind down, and Rachel, you're going to stay with us to the end of the show, but what should we be looking for that we haven't already seen? After a while, you got to wonder, do we need to hear another witness in mitigation? At the same time, he is facing a possible death sentence. I guess there can't be too many witnesses on his side.
Yeah, you can't put up too much. You have to, overkill is good at this point. You have to put as many people as you can. It sounds like we are going to hear from the defendant himself, so I guess that's what we have to look forward to, and what that's going to be like, I'll be watching.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, with that in mind, you will, because we're not letting you go yet. Oh. All right, with that in mind, we're going to take a quick break. We have lots more in this Ohio courtroom. Rachel Kugel going to stay with us. And don't go anywhere, Rachel Kugel, and don't go anywhere, you. We're going to be back with lots more in just a moment.
On behalf of the government.
Terrific witness for the defense here. You're going to see lots more in a moment on Courtside. First, let's check in with Rachel Kugel one last time. So, Rachel, we're in the death phase, as we call it, behind the scenes. What's the best defense at this point?
They're doing it. They're fighting for his life, and they're just trying to say he was a good firefighter and a good man. And
do you think, well, do you think there's a chance? I guess that comes dangerously close to asking you for a prediction, but we're in this business a long time. We know it's a long shot. He's got the best possible record for someone who might be spared the death sentence, but once you get this far, usually you're not.
Yeah, I think there's a chance, though, with this guy. I do. I think there's a chance that they're going to save his life.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope you're right in this case, Rachel Kugel. And I just want to ask you one last question, Rachel. We were talking earlier about Raising the Bar, which is going to premiere on September 1st. Any lessons you think from this case for those writers who are trying to recreate reality in Hollywood?
Well, I think what it shows is that, you know, truth is stranger than fiction, and they should try and focus on that. You know, there are defense attorneys out there that are fighting the good fight and are dealing in the gray area every day, and this is a good example of that. This, I can't say it's a bad guy.
And you're one of those, Rachel Kugel, fighting the good fight. That's why we love to have you on. With that, the Best Defense will rest for the day with a special thank you to Rachel for being with me today. And right now, we are going to check in with another one of the good guys, Jack Ford. He's got a look